Experiences in practice by monk disciples. Luangpor Teean Su 1 No. Wat Pa Sukatho, Gankro District, Chayapum Province. Practicing Dhamma with Luangpor Teean. In 1965, a meditation center at the Budayan Forest, in Lae Province, was renowned. Everyone knew that Luangpor Teean had established it. It was said that people who studied and practiced there would realize and really see the truth. There would be no more doubt about death and rebirth, about heaven and hell, about path and fruit, attainments. Some people persuaded me to take a look at it, because at that time I was trying hard with the Buddha meditation method to get peaceful, which I was reasonably successful at, but I still had doubts about death and rebirth, heaven and hell, path, fruit and nibbana. This made me think of Luangpor Teean all the time. I kept looking for a chance to meet him. Before Luangpor Buntum, who is a relative of mine, ordained, we had talked together about meditation. When he ordained, he went to practice with Luangpor Teean, beginning on 1966. At that time, I hadn't ordained yet. I had the opportunity to practice the Dhamma with him at the Budayan Forest in Lae. He taught the rhythmic meditation and walking meditation. At that time, I didn't like the rhythmic meditation very much. I was used to practicing Buddha, to sit still, and I was able to make the mind peaceful quickly. But Luangpor taught not to go for peacefulness. He taught to be aware all the time, to know the movements while doing the rhythmic meditation and not to get caught up in peacefulness. It was opposite to the method that I had been doing. Sometimes, I didn't feel like doing it. There was lots of resistance in the mind. Luangpor explained and showed me how to do it. The things he would talk about, his knowledge, I didn't have yet, I couldn't do it yet. Luangpor said to throw away my knowledge and my way of practicing, this produced misgivings. Sometimes he talked in a challenging way, saying, "How much money did you get a month, when you were working?" I answered, "At least 1,000 baht." "All right," said Luangpor Teean, "you come here to practice Dhamma, to do the rhythmic meditation and to do walking meditation in order to be aware. If you don't get any knowledge, if there is no change in your mind, different from before, I will give you 1,000 baht as compensation. But you have to really practice and follow my instructions completely." That's what he said to me. Maybe he saw that I had a lot of views. In the end I decided to do it. I had come already and I'd try it out. I tried to go against my original feeling. I determined to practice the rhythmic meditation to give rise to sati sampajanya. When one builds up awareness, awareness is what one gets. I practiced continuously. When thought would arise, I would be aware of it and come back to the dynamic meditation. When peace arose, I would be aware of it, I wouldn't be caught up in the peacefulness. I knew the body and mind more clearly. There was more sati sampajanya. I could keep up with the movements of the body and I could keep up with the mind thinking. Wisdom knowledge arose, I knew rupanama, I knew the body and the mind according to reality, in levels within the basic stage of materiality mentality. There was a shift in the mind, different from before. Doubt disappeared. I understood the difference between tranquility meditation and insight meditation. About 60% of my suffering was gone. I felt very confident in Luangpor Teean's teaching. My previous knowledge just melted away. I used to study magic and superstition. I saw that that was just convention. The rites and rituals that I used to perform I could give up, just like that. I felt confident in what I was doing. I understood what merit and evil are. I understood about heaven and hell. I understood religion and Buddhism. It was as if I was carrying 100 kilos and 60 kilos dropped off me when wisdom knowledge arose. Practicing only that much and I felt so much lighter. What would happen if I were to practice some more? I really had a lot of confidence in this method of using movements in order to develop awareness. Luangpor pointed out the levels of practice. He said, "This is just the basic stage of meditation. Don't get attached to it and think you've got a lot of knowledge, there is still much more. You have to determine to keep on practicing. Work more with the mind and you will get to know the stage of ultimate meaning." He asked me, "Do you really see? Do you believe me, or do you believe yourself?" I answered, "I believe myself." Luangpor was clever. He taught to see the reality of life. Everyone must see like this in order for it to be right. I didn't have to look for a teacher anymore because I got the most perfect lesson in my life from a teacher who couldn't read or write. Luangpor Teean's conduct. In the year 1966, Luangpor still couldn't read Thai, he could only read Lao. He couldn't write Thai but he was diligent, both in training to read and to write, as well as in teaching disciples. I've helped him with reading many times. Whatever Luangpor taught, he would practice, he would explain things and show us how to do it. His life was very simple, sitting and lying down, eating. His daily life was orderly, he gave his disciples a lot of attention, never being worried about difficulties. He gave himself up physically as well as his personal belongings. He tried hard to use his life for others. He wanted people to really know the Dhamma. Even though more than 30 years passed, Luangpor's conduct never changed. I respect him as having been a person with the greatest virtues. This feeling will never degenerate in my life. What happened at the Budayan forest? Those who lived at the Budayan forest in those days were determined to study and practice the Dhamma together as one. There were no papers with the schedule on it attached to the doors of the monks' huts, as is the case these days. There were 20 to 30 people there, but it was just as if there was no one there. It was really quiet. One had to be careful when asking questions because there was only just rhythmic meditation and walking meditation going on. Once, I asked a novice who was doing the rhythmic meditation something, he wasn't willing to talk to me. The teachings of Luangpor in those old days consisted mainly of just practice. In the early morning, one could hear the sound of monks doing walking meditation and the sound of dew falling on banana leaves. In Lae province there is a lot of dew. On hearing the dew dripping on banana leaves, one knew that it was exactly 3 a.m. Everyone would get up and start to practice. The sound of footsteps of the walking meditation could then be heard together, with the sound of the dew falling on the banana leaves, tup, tup, tup. The light of the lanterns was dimmed by the passing dust. In a day, there would be heaps of ants. I got the taste of the Dhamma that arose from developing awareness. I got more and more answers to the questions of my life. We stayed in little huts. When it rained we would get a little bit wet. We got in touch with life without excessive comforts. When eating, we would sometimes pour some water from our kettle onto the chili that was beginning to run out, an immediate solution to the problem. The water for washing the bowl had to be poured together in one vessel, and then used to wash other dishes. After that it would be used to water the trees that had been planted. The water for drinking and bathing was about a kilometer away from the retreat place. When going to bathe, one had to find some container to put water in and carry it back. One had to fully look after oneself. The young monks, on seeing the old monks carrying cans of water back to their huts, would carry it for them. Poverty made us use life in an orderly way without shrinking back. We were not afraid of difficulties. Sometimes, I would save the plastic bags that lay people would wrap food in, to fix up the leaking roof. I put forth steady effort and was very enthusiastic. The walking meditation path glistened from our walking so much, the wood in the hut where I would sit was marked from one sitting a lot in the same spot. As I was doing the rhythmic meditation or the walking meditation, It felt as though there was only just this one person in the world, no division into this and that. It would run counter to one's feelings to get an invitation from lay people, to eat at their house and perform certain ceremonies. One would think about his walking path and miss the seat in one's hut. Those places provided a meditator with peace and coolness, and gave him a sense of dignity. One would feel proud of doing walking meditation and of the times that one would develop awareness, by practicing the rhythmic meditation. This kind of work is something that gives one honor in life. One doesn't become fed up with it. Some days, while doing the rhythmic meditation in the hut, Luangpor would come by. I could remember the sound of his footsteps. "Are you here?" "I'm here, Luangpor." "What are you doing?" "I'm doing the rhythmic meditation." "Do you see outside as well as inside?" "I don't see outside, I only see what is inside." "What do you do to see outside?" "I open the door." "All right, then open the door." When I opened the door, Luangpor told me, "Make sure you see outside as well as inside, don't only just see outside or only just inside. Keep the mind in the middle." Having said that, he continued to walk to the next hut. I understood that Luangpor talked the language of the mind, that looking at the body and looking at the mind, working with the mind, must be like this. To get caught up in thought is wrong, the mind going out too much is wrong. One should be the observer. Whatever arises, watch it with the inner eye, that is to say, with awareness and wisdom. Don't want it, don't be it. In the morning and the evening, after the chanting, Luangpor used to give instructions. There were no tapes to listen to or books to read, we would only hear the teachings of Luangpor, and we would get to know the stages of practice that would arise in the mind from developing awareness. The mind would change progressively, one knows and sees by oneself. The words of Luangpor, in Dhamma language, that point things out, together with his diligent practice, made us realize that it is possible to understand, find, and see the Dhamma. It can be done. One can be liberated. The short interviews were not just thought-out questions, it was coming from experience, the results of meditation. It had nothing to do with reflections or analyses through reasoning. Rather, it is a fixed law of nature that exists already. It starts with rupanama, real things that actually exist. One gets energized continuously until there is not more ground for suffering to arise. There is not self anywhere. Luangpor taught just this. He pointed it out clearly, just as if he would take us by the hand, not letting us think and guess about it. When suffering doesn't have a base, it dries up, it doesn't sprout anymore. When the end of suffering is reached, there is nothing further to do. It is called according to reality, the remainder-less extinction of Namarupa. I'm not sure whether this is in the scriptures or not, I'm talking according to actuality. It cannot be termed otherwise. Luangpor's teachings pointed this out crystal clear. It's not that he just taught in order for us to understand intellectually. He taught to be. For example, a leech that sucks out blood. We didn't see it before, but when conditions are such that it drops off, we see it and we feel disgusted. But when the leech was stuck to us, we didn't know. This is similar to defilements in the mind. We give them the free hand as long as we don't know and understand. When we know, see, and understand them, they slip off. We feel in the same way as with the leech. When we are disgusted, we know, and then there is no need to ask anyone. Our lives come to an end at this point. We begin to study and practice the Dhamma with the form of rhythmic movements and walking meditation, developing awareness. I don't know whether other forms or methods are like this, also. I hold to this principle of developing awareness, using movements. Luangpor is my teacher. Whether this method can be found in the scriptures or not, may those who are intelligent reflect on it by themselves. What I've been writing so far is only just a small part, there is still much more, but it is not appropriate to say too much at this time. I guarantee that one day, if you have time to do the rhythmic meditation and develop awareness through walking meditation, Looking at the bodily movements and the thoughts in the mind, knowing them in time, able to chase and catch them, your existing problems and condition will confess and surrender because there is evidence. Those things will no longer harm you. You will become free. Life will be deathless, beyond birth, old age, sickness and death. The teachings of Luangpor spread gradually and continuously, until they reached the capital and went abroad. As long as there are human beings on this planet, of whatever nationality, if one studies one will find it just the same. I invite you to go ahead and study, whether you can read and write or not is not important. When Luangpor was very sick, he still kept teaching. He really dedicated his life to others. At the time that Luangpor had not yet ordained, he tried his best to let everyone see what he had discovered. I have spent a rains retreat at his home village. The old people there, as well as the young, told me about it. Not only that, but I've seen small well-built huts, 20 or 30 of them, built with his own money, so that people could practice. Also the food, which he would take care of by himself. When Luangpor was still a layman, he was rich and held a good position. He was an important trader in Chiang Khon district, Lae province. He had a big steamboat to take goods along the Mekong River. He would go as far up as Luang Prabang, Laos, and as far down as Nakhon Phanom, Thailand. In those days, one could freely trade between Laos and Thailand. On both sides of the river, people knew Nai Hoi, the trader, Portian. His real name was not Teean, it was Pun, but it was a tradition of people around there to call people according to their firstborn child. People thought it offensive to call someone directly by one's name. If we would call him Luangpor Pun, those people would take that to be a lack of respect. When Luangpor was a layman, many people respected and obeyed him. He was the headman of the village, and he used to be the leader in merit-making ceremonies. He offered enough money to build a whole temple. There are many things about him that haven't been mentioned. I don't mean to boast with these things. He was just an ordinary person like us, but he was someone who was able to discover the truth in this time and age. We should take him as our example. Before practicing with Luangpor, he would say that he used to make merit, ordained, performed the robe offering ceremony, built a ceremonial hall and did everything that is considered meritorious, but he didn't get to know the Dhamma that way. This made me think, hey, I didn't do as many meritorious things as Luangpor, I probably don't have a chance to know and see the Dhamma. But, in fact, it is not like that. Rich people as well as poor people can know, if one really practices and experiences bare and full awareness for a long enough period. Luangpor has been insisting on this all the way through. He challenged everyone and encouraged them to try it out and verify it for themselves. I would like to say that the reason I am a disciple of Luangpor is not because of his biography, not because of his external behavior, not because of hearing his words, or because of what people said about him. But it was because I tried out the method of developing awareness by using movements, and many results followed, until, in the end, there was nothing left of the word suffering. This was because of practicing according to Luangpor Teean's method. It is his teaching, to say that it is the method that the Buddha teaches is not incorrect. I'm not praising Luangpor Teean. I'm not bragging. I'm talking about what is practical, what is possible, what can be done in this lifetime. One doesn't have to wait for death, everyone can do it, can have it, can be it. Luangpor Teean is my teacher. I have followed everything he taught me, rhythmic and walking meditation, in order to generate awareness, to see the movements of the body with awareness, and to see thoughts in the mind with awareness, and to be the watcher of these two natural phenomena. Awareness and realization are the inner eye, they are the witness to the body and the mind, until one sees these two natural phenomena, and one gets the insight that they are only just material and mental things. They are not any self, they are just nature. Having seen it, one really knows that they are just rupa and nama, one knows how to deal with them and the problem is finished. One is beyond them. Next, Luangpor teaches to look at the suffering that is associated with rupa and nama. We look at materiality first, which is rupa dhamma. When we look at it with awareness, we see that it is a heap or a mass of suffering. We breathe to relieve suffering, we eat to extinguish suffering. When standing, sitting, walking and lying down we change position in order not to have suffering. Then, we see rupa disease. We must find a way to solve sickness and pain. The suffering of the body can only be remedied, it cannot be abandoned. If there is no remedy, that's the end of it, that is what rupa dhamma is like. As for nama dhamma, it can be realized. We watch the states of the mind, just as if we're sitting in a room that has windows, whatever arises, we see immediately. Originally the mind is in a state of normality, but objects come floating in, they are like guests. One sees gladness and sadness. One sees the mind that loves, gets angry, has greed and is deluded. One sees all of it because one is the watcher. When we look, we will see, and on seeing we can let go. One doesn't become the object of mind. This is not the same as watching materiality. The suffering of rupa cannot be abandoned, one can only lessen it. For example, when one is hungry, one eats to solve the problem, one cannot abandon hunger. The mind is not like this. The things in the mind can be completely abandoned, one can let go once and be rid of things for the rest of one's life, until there is no more birth, old age, sickness, and death. If we put our attention on the right spot, it is not difficult. It is just like a key that fits its lock. One can unlock it right away without wasting time. The principles of the four foundations of awareness can be compared to a key or to a perfect vehicle that one uses for traveling. One passes through continuously. The body, feelings, mind states, and objects of mind are stations that detain us human beings. It is hard to be free from them. But if we develop the foundations of awareness a lot, and put our body, feelings, mind, and mind objects in the boxing ring, awareness will be the champion. It will conquer constantly because the body, feelings, mind, and mind objects are not any self, they will have to confess and surrender to awareness. The truth cannot escape the truth, what is not true cannot withstand verification. The principles of the four foundations of awareness compare with a just judge who upholds uprightness. They charge suffering, the ego, the self, like, dislike, gladness, sadness, defilements, craving, being caught up in things, the sense of me. These things cannot arise. One could say that the foundations of awareness are the contraceptive medicine to control the birth of suffering. Suffering cannot establish itself, because one sees from the beginning that there is only rupa and nama. When one sees from the start that there are only just rupa dhamma and nama dhamma, this immediately affects suffering. It is shaken. This matter is about ending suffering, it is about peace, it is about the remainder-less extinction of all suffering. Luangpor Teean Apagaro. Watsanam Nai, Bongrua District, Nuntaburi Province. The experience of meeting Luangpor Teean. I am a monk from out in the country. My parents were farmers. Before I ordained, I made merit and made offerings. I would go to the monastery as the tradition prescribed, and as my parents used to do. At that time, I didn't practice yet. I ordained when I was nearly 23 years old, in 1961. Having ordained, I studied in an ordinary monastery in Hunan province. I practiced some meditation, but I didn't understand it very well. In 1968, I spent the Rains retreat in Chayapam province, and after that I learned to give Dhamma talks. In those days, in order to give talks, one had to study with a teacher. It so happened that a layman from Lahi province came to visit his relatives here, and he had heard Luangpor Teean speak Dhamma with Ajahn Mahaboatong, the latter being one of his first disciples. He practiced with Luangpor Teean, and he was invited to give a talk to the lay people at my wat. This man kept talking to me, telling me all about it, and it struck my mind how he could talk about the Dhamma. I had been a monk for 7 years but still didn't know or understand Dhamma. This made me doubt, and I felt ashamed of myself. I had studied some scriptures, but where was the Dhamma? Ajahn Mahabhotang had studied until he had a degree and still practiced too. Where is the Dhamma to be found? If I stayed to be a monk for many years, when I gave a talk there might be meditation monks present, and then I would be embarrassed. So I thought to myself, this year I have to go and practice the Dhamma, I have to go and study the Dhamma with Luangpor Teean to know and understand. As for learning how to give talks, it could wait. At that time, I was imagining that one would probably get psychic powers from practicing meditation, and that one would be able to dive into the earth, become invisible, disappear and those kinds of things, because that is what I had read in books. It is said that one could get the divine eye and ear, and I thought that it really was like that. That would be great. So I decided to find a teacher. I had very high expectations, they pushed me onward. I went to see Luangpor Teean at the Budayan forest in Lahi province. I arrived in the evening and asked to see Luangpor, but he had gone to his home village to open a meditation retreat there. I wanted to go after him. At that time, I had very strong confidence in Luangpor. I wanted to see what Luangpor Teean looked like. However, the monks told me to spend the night there first, and the next day they would take me to him. I agreed. I had a talk with Ajahn Mahabhotang but I was still thinking that I wanted to see Luangpor Teean. The next morning we set out to find Luangpor Teean at Bohom village. We arrived around 10 o'clock in the morning. I paid my respects to him, and he asked me, "Where do you come from?" I told him that I ordained at my home village in Udon Thani province and that I had been studying for 7 years. I told him about my doubts and that I wanted to practice the Dhamma with him. He didn't say much. He asked, "Are you really interested?" I said yes. He asked, "Are you going to practice sincerely?" I said yes. He said, "Practicing Dhamma is easy. There is no need for ceremonies and rituals." I liked that. I had already decided that if he told me to recite rising falling, I wouldn't do it, because I found it was embarrassing. But he was talking about practicing in a simple way, being at ease, using movements. No need to close the eyes while sitting, raising the hand, lowering the hand, making movements. Hey, that sounds simple. He showed me how to do it, and I followed him. When I was able to do it, he let me do it by myself. I felt a bit embarrassed at first. I am someone who easily feels ashamed. He told me to stay alone in a hut. I practiced alone at Bohom village for as long as 15 days, but I still didn't understand. After that, I practiced at the Budayan forest for about a month. Luangpor came to see me every day, 2 or 3 times. He would ask me with a few words about whether I understood or not. I didn't. Later on, one day, after the chanting, I sat chatting with Luangpor and Ajahn Mahabhotang. I told him that I would probably not understand if I practice like this. I had been ordained for 7 years and still didn't know, still didn't understand. Luangpor asked me if I understood Rupanama yet. No. I asked Luangpor if I could practice intensively for a while, which means not to go for the chanting, not to go on alms round and just practice by myself in my hut. Would Luangpor allow me to do that? Luangpor said, "Nobody has ever done that before." He thought and talked for a while and then agreed. It was decided. As for the food, it was up to Luangpor to tell a layman to bring it over to the hut. I practiced intensively for about a week and I understood, it was just basic understanding. At first I didn't see Rupanama, but later I did, I understood. Altogether, it took me about a month. Now I understood the meaning of ordination, even though I had been a monk for 7 years. I didn't know before, I just studied from books. Before, I just shaved my head and wore the brown robe without understanding anything about the way of life of a monk. Understanding arose as I was doing the rhythmic meditation, raising the hand, I was aware and knowledge arose. I knew without anyone telling me. What I knew, I had never heard and had never read in any book. Knowledge and understanding arose by itself. I saw Rupa and Nama. I saw Rupa Dhamma and Nama Dhamma, I saw Rupa disease and Nama disease, I saw convention. I saw impermanence, instability, and non-selfhood. I saw evil and merit. I saw religion and Buddhism. I saw until the end. I knew all this in an instant. This is the basic stage. I knew this after having practiced intensively for 7 days, but altogether I had been practicing exactly 1 month. I knew Rupanama. I knew many things. It was the knowledge that comes from the defilements due to insight, it is the knowledge of analytical knowledge. Luangpor had a way of teaching, but I didn't know it. Even while doing walking meditation, there were things in my mind. I was thinking about my father. I have been an orphan since I was 5 or 6 years old. My mother looked after me. I thought about my father. He was someone who didn't know anything. He didn't know why he was born, he didn't know and see himself. But I couldn't help him. I could only do something about myself. The next morning, Luangpor told me to stop the intensive practice. He was afraid others would want to follow my example. It would not be fair if he didn't allow others to do it also, if they asked to do so. That's what he said. No one had done this before, one would just practice continuously, working at the same time. There was no intensive practice. He told me to stop, so I stopped. Yet in my mind, I still wanted to continue practicing alone. But out of respect, I stopped. Whatever he said, one had to follow it. When I was first practicing, he didn't let me look at thought, until I had stopped for 4 or 5 days. At that time, I threw myself into it. It was powerful, I was caught up in analytical knowledge and joy. I was bold, I wanted to be alone. I was not afraid to have a Dhamma discussion with anyone, no matter how many degrees he might have. I knew the matter of materiality mentality well. I had never experienced something like this in my life. This is the way it is. The Buddha teaches what it means to be a monk. Even though one has ordained and studied, if one doesn't practice this, if one doesn't know and understand like this, it can be taken that one hasn't ordained as a Buddhist monk. Before, when studying the scriptures, I thought that it was just a matter of the past in India. Luangpor asked me, when it is like this, can you go back home? I said, I can, I'm confident to speak with the teacher. My teacher had been a monk for over 10 years and had studied the Pali language, he was a preceptor and the head monk of the vicinity. He had a lot of theoretical knowledge. Luangpor wanted me to go and teach. I felt that there was something unfinished. At that time, I had only just started. Why did Luangpor say that? I guess he had a reason for it. Luangpor wanted me to talk with my parents and relatives, he wanted me to talk with them about my experience. That's how it was in the old days, but now he has changed to another style. But I'm not like other people, others Luangpor would urge on. At that time, I had ordained exactly 7 years. Venerable Mahabodhi Tong was one of the first disciples, later Ajahn Kumkian, Ajahn Buntum and Ajahn Somai came, they followed each other closely. After this, Luangpor had me look at thought. When one first sets out to practice and one knows and understands materiality mentality, almost everyone gets caught up in analytical knowledge. Some people experience strong feelings of rapture, others don't. Luangpor didn't let them watch thought, if that was the case, instead he had them do work. Others he just let be. But he said not to be interested in thought, just let it go. The mind was thinking all sorts of good things and ideas, about the future as well as the past, thinking about teaching people, but Luangpor said not to follow it. He said to let the thoughts cool down, let them come to rest. Luangpor taught with a kind of psychology, he had a way to watch people's minds, to watch those who came to practice. He would ask, "How are you? Is your mind good or not? Is there something in your mind or not? Is your mind in its original state or not?" When the mind was in its original state, just like there was nothing there, not knowing or seeing anything at all, he would tell that person to watch thought. The Buddha was enlightened because he worked with the mind. To watch the mind with awareness, one has to look right here. Luangpor advised to look at this place. He said, "No thought and let it go." He had us do the rhythmic meditation, to be aware of movements and to watch and see thought. That's about all he said, and then he would vanish. I watched thought for 9 days and I saw objective matter, ultimate meaning, and changing conditions. It was in the evening that I saw it. There was a change in my mind. When I saw Rupanama there was another kind of change, but on seeing ultimate meaning, there was another change. I felt very confident at this point. I realized that I was a noble one. Being a noble one is to be found right here. It is not to do with shaving the head or wearing brown robes. I saw that it was right here. Luangpor taught whoever came to practice to look at the mind, to watch the various thoughts. When there is a change in the mind, everyone should know and see it. This was his method of teaching. He would ask the practitioners what they saw and understood. We would inform him that we knew or understood ultimate meaning or whatever it was. Formerly, I understood that in order to be a monk, a noble one had to shave the head, wear brown robes and stay at a monastery, but now, I understood that anyone can be a noble one, women as well as men. One can wear clothes of whatever color, one can have any nationality, speak whatever language or uphold any religion. This was not yet clear when I knew Rupanama. I understood it but not yet clearly, but on seeing ultimate meaning, awareness was more clear and I saw things that were more refined. I looked at thought until I understood ultimate meaning and various other things. Luangpor advised me to watch thought and to cross over to ultimate meaning. Another change took place. I saw greed, hatred, and delusion, and after that there were more changes. I understood and saw in stages. I understood sickness and death, heaven and hell, evil and merit. But I didn't know in the same way that Luangpor knew. Luangpor knew in stages, but my understanding was different. It wasn't long before the mind changed a third time, and it changed completely. I saw greed, hatred, and delusion at the same time as objective matter, ultimate meaning and changing conditions. After that there were insights continuously. I saw virtue, I saw sensuality, etc., until I knew everything. I understood what the Buddha taught. I practiced alone and didn't talk with anyone. One day, Luangpor gave a talk. He spoke all the way from the beginning of practice. I listened to what he said. I thought, hey, that's exactly what I've experienced and seen. When the talk was over, I went over to talk with him. We just talked very briefly. Since that day, for me, whatever someone may say or teach, I am completely confident that the method that I practiced with Luangpor, the method that Luangpor teaches, is a shortcut, is a straight way of practice, is a method that has nothing to do with ceremonies and rituals. The paths, fruits and nibbana, that we are doubting about, that we're searching for, that we're trying to attain, have nothing to do with studying. One can study or not study. It is another thing altogether. I really am confident about it. Counting from the day that I started to practice by myself, about 1 month and 20 days had passed, from the outer bark to the heartwood. On the last day, I sat doing the rhythmic meditation. I mostly sat, I walked less. It was as if I came to an end, as if I was finished. But awareness was still good. I still felt everything clearly. I was thinking by myself, am I crazy or not? No, I'm not. The eyes still see, the ears still hear, and I still know coming and going. I'm not crazy. Why is it like this? At that time, I didn't know yet. But when I knew, I realized, this is not wrong, this is really what the Buddha teaches. I went to talk with Luangpor and informed him that it was like this. He said, birth has ended, being has ended, the practice has finished. Luangpor used to say that, the Buddha cut his hair only once and that the Buddha kills people, but most of us don't understand these comparisons, we don't know what has been cut. But when I experienced it, I knew that things are like this. When I talked with Luangpor, we didn't talk very long, when I knew, he just let me go. During the last stage that I was watching thought, I looked at my mind changing continuously, in periods, in stages. But there must be an object to know, if one knows without an object to know, if one knows absent-mindedly, it shows that it is not right, it is still wrong. There must be an object constantly, one has to see constantly. I completely understood about the training in virtue, the higher training in virtue, the higher training of the mind and the higher training in wisdom. I knew all of it. But I cannot speak in the same way that Luangpor did. The way he used to talk was that things have to be like this and like that, but what I saw was more like an immediate liberation. Luangpor has another style. It goes in stages. My way is different. Altogether there were 5 shifts in the mind, it happened very quickly. With the last one, I knew the state of arising passing that Luangpor used to talk about. They say, the eye sees a form, it arises and passes. One hears, it arises and passes. Something comes in contact with the body, it arises and passes. This is what's in the scriptures, anyone can say it, but this has nothing to do with the state of arising passing. It is something different. I can really guarantee this method. At this time, with Luangpor having passed away, I can insist that the principles of the method that Luangpor teaches are right. If one really practices, one will get results, regardless of who it is, one can be ordained or not be ordained, it is not connected with having accumulated virtuous qualities in the past. It doesn't depend on anything. This is something different altogether. That's the way it is. Practicing intensively in order to be aware, these are just words. One keeps to oneself, one doesn't talk with anyone, one is alone in one's hut, practicing awareness will become more continuous. This is external practice that people can see, but if the internal awareness is continuous, then, even though one doesn't stay alone, it is also intensive practice. But it is difficult, it is not easy to be constantly aware all the time. But if one can do it, it is intensive practice. Some people can do it without difficulty, wherever one may be. Among 100 people, there may be 1 or 10 who can do it like that. At first, it is quite hard though, one cannot yet catch the awareness, and there are a lot of thoughts. Awareness can't stand up to the thinking, there is only little awareness. But when practicing for a long period of time, the awareness gradually increases. But at first, one sometimes feels disheartened, awareness arises with difficulty. When I first practiced with Luangpor, I sometimes did some walking outside the hut, but, later, when I practiced intensively by myself, I mostly was inside the hut and didn't go outside. I used the posture of sitting more than the posture of walking. One day, as I was sitting, practicing awareness, making movements in the sitting position, for one moment it was just as if things happened very fast, it was as though it happened in a flash, like a flash of lightning. To use Luangpor's expression, it was like a blink of the eye or a snap of the fingers. At that time, it was as if there was something heavy and I threw it off. I felt light. I knew I was light because I had never experienced this before. I felt that something was different. But there was awareness. It didn't go anywhere. I knew that there was lightness. Awareness was stable all the way through, even while being asleep, I knew. When awareness is perfected, dreams during sleep will become less or they might stop altogether. Ordinarily we think a lot, but when we develop awareness, thought becomes less and less. In the scriptures, it is said that noble ones, or those with awareness and wisdom, don't dream. This is talking according to the books. In the daytime we think and at night we dream. One knows one is dreaming, it is similar to thinking. One knows, sees, and understands it, and so one knows at the time that one is dreaming. Developing awareness through making movements with the hands, if we find that it is not convenient to do so, we can be aware of other movements such as blinking the eyes, breathing, or whatever. Awareness can be practiced in many ways, it is universal, it can be applied to our duties and our work. But what is important is to know at that moment, knowing within oneself. We make a movement or we take hold of something. Know what you are doing. There must be one point or other to know, without having a focus somewhere, we can't catch awareness. The knowing is the most important. If we are aware of some part of the body, we will automatically know other parts that are moving because they are connected. If there is awareness within, one knows while working. It is like turning on the light, suddenly there is brightness. It works at the same time. It connects. Just like a tightrope. When it is cut, everything jerks. We should train our minds to be with awareness and watch our thoughts. Never mind if the mind thinks. It is not that we try to stop thinking. Go ahead and let it think. But look at it. We are just the observer. Observe it continuously and let it go. Trying to train like this, one will make gradual progress, until one reaches that point. All things arise from a cause, things pass because the cause is no longer there, that is what monks teach. But we don't know what the cause is. The monks teach cause condition, object condition, etc. There is a point where causes are finished and conditions are finished. We don't know where they went. No one followed to see what happened. Whether one knows or not, one doesn't see it. We shouldn't call this point the end, because it would be encouraging people to do evil. It would be misunderstood by people who still don't have enough understanding. Therefore, the way of teaching must be a skillful one. Luangpor said, "There is no coming and no going." One can say as much as that. If we were to say that there is no life after death, it would just be the end of the matter, and people wouldn't do anything. They would call it wrong view that one who does good doesn't get rewarded, or doesn't get merit from meritorious actions. There is no heaven and no hell. This is a wrong teaching. There is no coming and no going, reflect on it yourself. It's up to you to figure it out or not. Study it for yourself, know, and see, and be it for yourself. That is better than what someone else might say. When you are and have this knowledge, you will be at ease. Others may want to be reborn. That's their business, but we don't come from or go anywhere. We stay here. In reality, if we understood what the end of life really is, we would be at ease. Everything would be done easily and in comfort. But as it is, we don't understand, so we act out of not understanding, we act in an ignorant way. To act with knowledge is different. There are people who know, but people who don't know still don't know, even when they practice. They are not sure and not confident. But for someone who knows, whatever happens, he or she is sure, whether one practices or not, one is confident. Because one knows. One can practice or not, it really is very simple. The Buddha teaches to practice simply. When we get to that point, we see that the Buddha's teaching is very simple. It is so simple that nothing remains to be said, or there is nothing left to teach. What is there to get? There is nothing to get. Putting it simply, the Buddha teaches to stop, doesn't he? He teaches people to stop. But we don't stop. We're not willing to stop. When we stop, it will be finished, there is nothing. But the body still goes on living, one still eats, one still does various duties and practices, the body still moves. But inside, there is stillness, there is not wanting, there is coolness. It has stopped, it is enough. We could talk in terms of path, fruit, and nibbana, or whatever. There is not birth, there is not death, there is not aging, there is not sickness, there is not going, there is not coming. These words are convention, words spread out and enlarge. So, may all of you be able to train yourselves and prepare yourselves. Try to let appear that which exists already, and when the time comes that the breath stops, it will really be very easy. Ajahn Da Sammakatho. Wat Buddha Yanuntaram Monastery, Las Vegas, 5320 Kell Lane, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89156. Presently living at Reading Meditation Center. www.readingmeditationsociety.org. The path that is a path. The word path here doesn't mean a path on land, in the water, in the air, or a footpath, but it means a path to be traveled by the mind. From suffering to no suffering. From problems to no problems. From darkness, complexity, and confusion to brightness, peace and coolness. The Buddha is only the one who pointed out the way, Akatha Aro the Takatha. Whether one travels on the path or not, depends entirely on the individual who chooses to travel the path. Whether one acts, speaks, and thinks in a good or bad way, is a personal matter. Whoever practices in accordance with the teachings that the Buddha introduced, will inevitably be someone with brightness, will make progress in life and in work, and will not create problems for society. By contrast, whoever has no interest in the teachings of the Buddha, will experience suffering and will drop into darkness and delusion. Such a person doesn't know the direction that life should take. Such a person is ignorant of what is what, and harms both self and others out of delusion and lack of understanding, through bad behavior in body, speech, and mind. Such a person is under the influence of greed, hatred, and delusion. Described in the biography of the Buddha, as well as before the time of the Buddha, some practiced physical torment of self, and it was widely believed that the 7 or 8 absorptions were the highest of attainments. The Buddha saw that such was not the way to completely escape suffering, it is just a way to temporarily become peaceful or to subdue oneself, like putting a rock on top of the grass. The Buddha rejected those methods, and sought the way out by working with the mind. He continually observed with awareness the conditions that, without pause, arose in the mind, changed and passed away. This caused him to realize the truth, he found the answer to everything, he was the perfect Buddha. He knew right as well as wrong. In sum, the Buddha searched for 6 years to find a way out, through all the various methods that existed in those days, were all just deluded ways, wrong ways, closed ways. They were dead ends, they were paths that are not paths. Awareness to continually watch the movements of body and mind, in accordance with the form of the 4 foundations of awareness, highlights the importance of the section, in that sutta, which stresses, 1. The postures and, 2. Sampajanya, or awareness directed towards the body. It is the means to access and come into contact with the basic objects of insight meditation, that is to say, to know rupanama, rupa-doing, nama-doing, rupa-disease, nama-disease, impermanence, instability, non-selfhood, convention, religion, evil, and merit. This is the initial stage for the practitioner. To know and experience these phenomena is to enter the highway of the Dhamma, and at the same time it is an arrow that points to the final destination, the end of the end, or the end of suffering, which is the highest goal of life. When we have reached it, we will have answers to everything. When knowing and seeing the truth, according to the way things are in reality, the mind begins to change from one thing to another, through the power of ultimate truth. Previous behavior and tendencies get reformed, and, at the same time, that which is really true in life becomes manifest, one loses one's naive beliefs about, for example, ghosts and angels, lucky omens, heaven and hell. One starts a new life, right there, at that point. Just that little bit of awareness is the vehicle that leads life to the end of all suffering. When life reaches the end of the end, it is as if one lives in a new world. It is a world of spiritual freedom, safe from spiritual suffering, it is a safe and peaceful realm. Life that has come in touch with the highest truth in Buddhism, will be established in the now, and it will be very simple. It will be light, comfortable, and without worry or doubt. There will be no danger. I can guarantee that one who has come to the stage of ultimate meaning will definitely not lose his or her way. He or she will have nothing to do with ghosts, angels, auspicious timing, sacred things, hell, heaven, death, rebirth, and so forth. This is because one who practices the Dhamma by developing awareness in this fashion, must know and contact objects all the time. That person must review the stages of practice, and investigate what one knows, what one is watching, where and how. All of this one knows instantly. It is said that the truth will not leave someone who is real, and, in the same way, someone who is real will not discard the truth. The secret of changing the states of mind. Take this little feeling, this awareness, as the starting point. Know when a thought pops up in the mind. Just know indifferently, know it, and let it pass. There is not need to pull the mind back, and do not let the thought pull you away. Awareness does its duty of watching by itself. When awareness keeps a close and careful watch, the observer and the observed are separated things, and one doesn't get entangled in thought. There will only be pure awareness in the present. At the moment that there is not greed, hatred, or delusion mixed up with the feeling, one will automatically know from deep within the mind that a change in the mind has clearly taken place. And in the end, that small awareness will have become a hidden power in each and every posture. We know Luangpor Teean from meeting and talking with him, from reading his books, from what others have said about him, and from practicing. But I know him as the one who gave me a new life. The principles for conducting one's life in a simple, light, and comfortable way, without worry, were passed on to me from experience gained, when I was close to Luangpor, continuously and for a long period of time. I have spent 6 rains retreats with him. I used to think, in those days, that I would stick with him forever. To get a new life is like reliving life anew, or one could say that it is dying and being born again. Dying before death, being born again, my being born in the Dhamma, approaches now its 15th year. At present, life is in its teenage stage in the Dhamma. I'm not much attached to places or people. I feel that my experiences of life are very little. It's not yet enough, but as far as practice goes, it is sufficient. I know what to do, and I don't suffer. Let me go back a bit. Formerly, when I went to see Luangpor Teean, I thought I would dedicate myself to him, whatever he would advise I would determine to do, as a lesson or an experiment. I determined this because I had strong determination and an aspiration to prove myself according to his principles, and I was confident that this way that I had chosen was the last way out. With such determination, opposing views, opinions, and thoughts were erased altogether. I had no doubts, I had no problem at all. When I started to practice with determination, fully and continuously, by being aware of standing, sitting, walking, lying down, bending, stretching, moving, blinking, breathing, swallowing saliva, leaning to the right and the left, raising and lowering the head, eating, drinking, going to the toilet, dressing, and so forth for 3 days, I was aware and completely awake. Awareness was purely in the present, there was no past or future. Materiality and mentality appeared clearly and cut off doubt. I saw Rupa as Rupa, and Nama as Nama. On seeing it, doubts disappeared. I won't talk about my personal knowledge, but I'll say something directly about the principles, that are the technique of practice. To practice intensively, alone in one's room, is a wonderful opportunity for someone who is seeking a way out for oneself, and it presents an opportunity, for those who are keen on this way of practice, for those who are real, and for those who are genuinely determined, and who practice sincerely, to really prove this style of practice. One can choose this solitary practice for either 7 days, 15 days, 3 months, 1 year, or 3 years. Those who volunteer to practice can choose according to what is suitable for oneself. One should stay alone and keep silent in one's hut or whatever place it may be. A monk or teacher would advise one in developing awareness and could be consulted. He or she is a friend to help the practitioner to really go for it, without having to do anything else. Just to work with the mind, to observe oneself, to be with oneself. To be determined to just watch over the movements of body and mind, all the time. Not to read books, not to receive or write letters, to be cut off from the external world temporarily, just for the time that one is practicing intensively. Every day, someone would bring food over once or twice a day, depending on what one agrees on with the teacher. The teacher, who is like a good friend, would pay close attention to the practitioner, and advise or warn him or her when necessary. Things can be discussed with the teacher, and problems or obstacles can be overcome that way. When one practices, results will appear by themselves.
May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease.